You thought the anxious suffered more? The avoidance reality is far worse. Most people think those with anxious attachment have it the worst. They wear their emotions on their sleeves, they chase, they crave reassurance. But here's what nobody talks about: the avoidance. They suffer in silence. They build walls so high, even they get trapped behind them. If you're avoiding, you already know this pain. It's not the fear of being abandoned. It's the fear of being truly seen, truly known. You sabotage closeness, not because you don't want love, but because deep down you don't believe you're worthy of it. And that is a slow, silent, soul-crushing prison. Avoidance don't escape suffering. They just delay it. And here's the kicker. Every time you run, every time you push someone away, you reinforce the very pain you're trying to avoid. You think distance makes you safe. In reality, it makes you isolated. You tell yourself you're independent, but deep down, you're starving for connection, for warmth, for love. But you've trained yourself to reject it before it can even reach you. So what's the way out? It's not about forcing yourself to be different. It's about understanding why you do this in the first place. It's about seeing the pattern, acknowledging the fear, and taking action despite it. You think letting someone in will break you. No. Staying in this cycle of avoidance is what's truly destroying you. The only way out of this is through. You don't need to become less avoidant. You need to become more courageous. You need to lean into discomfort, take the risk of connection, and break the habit of retreating. The real strength isn't in avoidance. Real strength is in standing still when every fiber of your being wants to run. So I ask you, what will you do today? Will you keep running? Will you keep reinforcing the very pain that haunts you? Or will you take one step, one action to prove to yourself that you are bigger than this pattern? Your future self is waiting. And I promise you it's worth the fight. Avoidants live under the illusion that they are escaping pain by keeping their distance. They believe that by not relying on anyone, not exposing their vulnerabilities, and staying self-sufficient, they are somehow avoiding the suffering that others, especially those with anxious attachment, experience. But what they don't realize is that they are not actually escaping suffering at all. They are simply postponing it, pushing it further down the road, reinforcing it, and allowing it to grow in the shadows. And when it finally catches up to them, it is far more destructive, far more isolating, and far more difficult to face. The reality is that avoidance is not freedom. It is a carefully crafted illusion of independence built not from strength, but from fear. Avoidants believe they are in control, that they can regulate their emotions by simply staying away from situations that might make them feel vulnerable. But control is not the same as healing. In fact, the more they avoid, the more powerless they become. Each time they push someone away, each time they choose isolation over connection, they reinforce the very pain they are trying to escape. Pain does not disappear just because it is ignored. It festers, it buries itself deep in the subconscious and grows in the form of loneliness, emotional numbness, and regret. While someone with anxious attachment feels their pain in the moment, expressing their fears, seeking reassurance, and experiencing the raw intensity of their emotions, avoidance suppress everything. But suppression does not equal resolution. It simply means that the pain is accumulating, waiting for an inevitable moment to surface, often in the form of deep dissatisfaction, failed relationships, or a sense of emptiness that no amount of independence can fill. What makes this even more tragic is that avoidants often don't even recognize their suffering until it is too late. They become so skilled at detachment that they convince themselves they don't need deep emotional connections. They rationalize their isolation, telling themselves that people are too demanding, that relationships are too complicated, that they are simply better off alone. And for a while, this belief provides comfort. But then in the quiet moments, when there is no distraction, no external noise, the truth emerges. The truth that despite all their efforts to avoid pain, they are still suffering. The consequences of this delayed suffering are severe. Avoidants often experience failed relationships not because they don't want love, but because they don't allow themselves to receive it. They may sabotage relationships before they get too serious, convincing themselves that something is wrong with their partner when in reality it is their own fear driving them away. They may struggle with deep emotional repression, finding it difficult to connect not only with others but with their own feelings. And over time, they may come to realize that the very thing they feared the most, being alone, being disconnected, being unloved, has become their reality, not because the world abandoned them, but because they abandoned the world. The painful irony is that avoidants often believe they are protecting themselves, but in truth, they are causing themselves more harm. While anxious individuals may struggle with rejection and emotional distress, they are at least engaging with their emotions, facing their fears head on and learning through experience. Avoidants, on the other hand, remain stuck in a cycle of retreat, never truly addressing their wounds, and as a result, they carry them for far longer than they need to. Avoidance is not a solution, it is a delay, and the longer the pain is delayed, the more power it has. True freedom does not come from running away. It comes from confronting what scares you the most. Avoidants operate under the belief that distance is their shield, that by keeping emotional space between themselves and others, they are protecting themselves from harm. They believe that by maintaining independence and self-reliance, they can avoid the pain that comes with relationships, intimacy, and vulnerability. But what they fail to realize is that this very strategy, this very habit of pushing others away, is what isolates them and reinforces the deep emotional starvation they are unknowingly suffering from. At first, avoidance feels like control. It feels like safety. When emotions start to rise, when intimacy starts to deepen, avoidants instinctively pull back, retreating into solitude where they believe they are safe from being hurt, judged, or abandoned. They pride themselves on their ability to detach, to not need anyone, to stay in control of their own emotions without depending on another person. It seems like the perfect defense mechanism. But over time, this very act of self-protection turns into self-imposed exile. The more they distance themselves, the more alone they become, not just physically, but emotionally and psychologically. They convince themselves that they are fine, that they prefer solitude, that relationships are too demanding, or that people are too complicated. They rationalize their behavior by believing they are different, that they simply don't need deep connection the way others do. But no matter how much they try to convince themselves otherwise, the truth remains human beings are wired for connection, and denying that need only leads to a slow, unacknowledged form of suffering. What makes this even more painful is that avoidants are not consciously aware of the damage they are doing to themselves in the moment. Unlike anxious individuals who feel their suffering intensely and immediately, avoidants suppress their emotional needs so effectively that they don't realize how much they are starving for connection until it's too late. They tell themselves that they are fine without intimacy, without deep relationships, without allowing anyone to truly know them. But the human heart does not work that way. It does not stop needing just because the mind decides to shut it down. As a result, avoidants experience emotional hunger, but instead of acknowledging it, they try to satisfy it in indirect ways through distractions, achievements, surface-level interactions, or even relationships that lack true emotional depth. They may engage in casual dating, work excessively, immerse themselves in hobbies, or surround themselves with acquaintances who don't require them to open up. But none of these things truly fill the void, because the void was never about external factors. It was about their own fear of letting themselves be seen, known, and loved. The longer this pattern continues, the more damage it does. Avoidants may wake up one day and realize that despite their best efforts to remain in control, they feel a deep emptiness inside. They may look at their life and see a series of broken or unfulfilled relationships, friendships that lack real closeness, and a lingering sense that something is missing. They may reach a point where they can no longer ignore the fact that their so-called independence has come at a cost they never intended to pay. What they once saw as strength, detachment, self-reliance, emotional distance, has actually been their greatest weakness. The truth is, running from closeness does not protect them. It isolates them, keeps them stuck in a cycle of emotional starvation, reinforcing the very pain they were trying to avoid in the first place. And the longer they stay in this pattern, the harder it becomes to break free, because avoidance does not just prevent pain, it builds walls so thick that even the avoidant themselves can no longer see what's on the other side. The avoidant mindset is built on the belief that emotional distance is the key to safety. Whether consciously or unconsciously, avoidants convince themselves that the best way to prevent pain is to minimize vulnerability. They don't engage deeply, they hesitate to express emotions, and they retreat the moment someone gets too close. But what they often fail to realize is that this pattern is not a reflection of who they truly are. It is a learned response, a defense mechanism shaped by past experiences. The key to change is not about forcing themselves to be different. It is about understanding why they react this way in the first place. Many avoidants have developed this attachment style as a survival mechanism. At some point in their lives, they learn, whether through childhood experiences, past relationships, or societal conditioning, that emotional closeness leads to pain, rejection, or disappointment. Maybe they had caregivers who were emotionally unavailable or unpredictable, teaching them that expressing needs would not be met with warmth or care. Maybe they experienced betrayal or abandonment in relationships, reinforcing the belief that opening up would only lead to suffering. Whatever the case, they internalize the idea that the safest way to exist is to rely only on themselves and to keep others at a comfortable distance. This is why avoidants don't actively choose to be this way. It is an ingrained pattern, a subconscious strategy designed to protect them. The problem with this strategy is that it operates on an outdated belief system. While it may have served a purpose in the past, it is no longer necessary in the present. The world is not the same as it was when they first developed these defenses. The people they are engaging with today are not the same people who hurt them before. And yet they continue to live as though every relationship, every moment of intimacy is a potential threat. Breaking free from this cycle does not mean trying to force themselves to be more open overnight. It does not mean pretending to be comfortable with vulnerability when deep down they are not. It simply means becoming aware of the pattern and questioning its validity. Every time they feel the impulse to withdraw, to push someone away, or to avoid emotional engagement, they need to pause and ask themselves, what am I actually afraid of? Is this reaction based on the present, or am I reliving an old fear? By bringing awareness to these automatic responses, avoidants begin to loosen their grip on them. Instead of reacting impulsively, they create space for new choices. They begin to see that their fear of closeness is not about the other person, it is about their own unresolved wounds. And once they recognize this, they gain the power to challenge it. They can start making small, intentional efforts to lean into connection rather than pull away from it. This does not mean they have to suddenly become an open book or share their deepest emotions right away. It means taking small steps, expressing a thought they would normally keep to themselves, staying present in a moment of intimacy instead of mentally retreating, or allowing someone to comfort them without deflecting. Each time they take one of these steps, they prove to themselves that closeness does not equal danger, that emotional connection does not have to end in pain. Healing does not happen in one grand dramatic moment. It happens in the small daily choices to show up differently. The goal is not to erase avoidance, but to become more conscious of when it is happening and to choose a different response. The more avoidants learn to recognize their fears, the more they realize that they are not their fears. They are not their past. They are not doomed to repeat the same patterns forever. And once they truly see that, they gain the freedom to change. Not by force, but by understanding. The essence of growth, especially for avoidance, lies not in avoiding discomfort, but in embracing it. It's a hard truth, but it's the truth that sets them free. Avoidants tend to see emotional discomfort, vulnerability, and intimacy as threats. When feelings start to intensify, or when relationships begin to demand more than they're willing to give, the instinctive response is to pull away, to run, to shield themselves behind walls of emotional distance. But true strength is not in running away, it's in standing firm, facing the discomfort head on, and moving through it, no matter how challenging that feels. When an avoidant faces discomfort, the first reaction is often to shut down or retreat. This response is automatic because it's deeply ingrained in their psyche. The emotional discomfort feels unbearable, and the instinct to avoid it has been built up over years of conditioning. However, this retreat is precisely what keeps them stuck in the cycle of emotional starvation. By running, they deny themselves the opportunity to grow, to learn, and to heal. Growth doesn't come from avoiding the tough moments. It comes from facing them, from enduring the discomfort long enough to find new ways of responding to it. Courage in this context is not the absence of fear. It's the ability to move forward despite fear. Avoidants need to understand that their emotions, as overwhelming as they may seem, are not the enemy. In fact, their emotions hold the key to their growth and healing. The more they shut down or suppress these emotions, the more power they give to their fears, and those fears continue to control their behavior. But if they can summon the courage to stay present, to feel the discomfort instead of avoiding it, they begin to reclaim control over their emotions. One of the biggest misconceptions avoidants have is that vulnerability makes them weak. They believe that by staying emotionally distant, they are protecting themselves from being hurt or taken advantage of. But in truth, it is the avoidance itself that makes them vulnerable. When they shut down, when they refuse to engage, they prevent themselves from experiencing the full range of human emotions: love, connection, support, and intimacy. In this way, they are not just avoiding pain, they are also avoiding the very things that make life rich and fulfilling. Real strength lies in the willingness to show up fully, to open up to others, and to trust that their feelings will not destroy them. Taking action in the face of discomfort is the key to breaking the pattern for avoidance. This action might look like staying in a conversation instead of withdrawing, allowing themselves to be vulnerable in small ways, or staying open to emotional connection. Even when their instincts scream to retreat, it might mean reaching out for help, even when it feels terrifying. These small acts of bravery build momentum. With each step, they prove to themselves that they are stronger than their fears, that they can face discomfort without being consumed by it. The path to emotional freedom is not about becoming less avoidant. It's about becoming more courageous. Courage doesn't mean never feeling fear. It means feeling the fear and choosing to move forward anyway. Avoidance can begin to build this courage one step at a time. It's about showing up in moments of emotional discomfort and not retreating. It's about learning to trust others with their feelings, even when it feels like a risk. It's about choosing connection, even when everything in them wants to run in the opposite direction. In reality, it's not about changing who they are. It's about acknowledging their fears and then choosing to act in a way that goes against those fears. Over time, they can build new, healthier patterns of relating to others. The discomfort doesn't disappear, but it becomes manageable. It's no longer something that controls them. Instead, they learn how to use it as fuel for growth, for greater emotional depth, and for deeper connection. In the end, the only way out of the cycle of avoidance is through it. The discomfort will not last forever, but avoiding it will keep them trapped in the same place. The courage to face the fire of vulnerability is what will set them free. And in doing so, they will discover that true strength is not in avoiding the emotional storms. It's in weathering them with grace and courage, knowing that on the other side, they will find a more authentic, connected, and fulfilling life. The path to healing and emotional freedom for avoidance begins with one critical choice: taking action. It may seem counterintuitive, especially when emotions feel overwhelming and the urge to retreat is strong, but taking that first step, no matter how small, is the key to breaking free from the patterns that have kept them stuck. Avoidants often convince themselves that they can change at some future time, that they'll be ready when the circumstances are just right. But the truth is, there is no perfect moment. The moment to act is always now, even if it feels uncomfortable, even if it feels like there are 1,000 reasons to wait. The biggest obstacle avoidance faces is their tendency to overthink and delay action. They can become so focused on their fears, anxieties, and perceive limitations that they convince themselves that change is too difficult or too risky. They may spend years trying to figure out the perfect way to open up, to trust, or to let someone in, but in the meantime, they remain stuck in a cycle of avoidance and emotional starvation. This is why it's crucial for them to realize that action, not perfection, is the key to change. They don't need to have it all figured out before they begin. They simply need to take that first step. For avoidance, action is often the antidote to fear. The more they avoid, the more their fears grow. They avoid connection because they fear vulnerability, but in avoiding vulnerability, they only reinforce the belief that it's too dangerous to open up. This creates a cycle of fear and avoidance that feels impossible to break. The only way to disrupt this cycle is by taking action despite the fear. By leaning into discomfort, they show themselves that their fears are not insurmountable, that vulnerability and connection are not as dangerous as they once believed. The first action doesn't have to be monumental. It doesn't have to be some grand declaration of emotional openness. It can be as simple as allowing someone to be there for them, even if it's just a little bit. It can be starting a conversation that feels uncomfortable or allowing themselves to be vulnerable in small ways. Every small action is a victory. Every small act of courage chips away at the walls they've built around themselves. These actions are the building blocks of new patterns, new ways of relating to themselves and others. It's important for avoidance to recognize that change won't happen all at once. They won't suddenly transform into someone who's completely comfortable with intimacy and vulnerability overnight. But with each step they take, they build momentum. Over time, these small actions accumulate and create a shift in their mindset. They start to realize that emotional closeness doesn't have to lead to pain, that it doesn't always result in rejection or abandonment. They begin to learn that vulnerability is not a weakness, it's a source of strength. And the more they practice taking action, the easier it becomes. Taking action also means confronting the beliefs and fears that have been holding them back. Avoidants may have deep-rooted fears of rejection, judgment, or betrayal. They may believe that allowing someone in will expose them to hurt or that they will lose their sense of independence. But these beliefs are often based on past experiences that no longer serve them. The act of taking action, of choosing to open up, of allowing themselves to be seen and known, forces them to challenge these limiting beliefs. They begin to realize that not everyone will reject them, that not everyone will betray their trust, and that true intimacy doesn't require sacrificing independence. It requires sharing and coexisting. Ultimately, it is not the absence of fear that leads to healing. It is the willingness to act despite fear. For avoidance, the most powerful thing they can do is to push through their instinct to retreat and choose connection instead. Every time they take action in the face of their fears, they rewrite the script. They show themselves that they are capable of more than they thought, and with every step forward, they move closer to the emotional freedom and deep, meaningful relationships they desire. Change may be uncomfortable, it may be slow, but the key is to keep moving, to keep choosing action, even when it feels scary. Each small step will lead to a deeper understanding of themselves and a more fulfilling life. The road to overcoming avoidance is not about perfection or achieving an impossible standard of emotional openness. It's about embracing self-compassion. For avoidance, self-compassion is a powerful tool that can help them break the cycle of self-criticism, isolation, and emotional detachment. When you begin to approach yourself with kindness and understanding, you give yourself permission to be imperfect, to feel vulnerable, and to make mistakes without judgment. Self-compassion allows avoidance to recognize that their fears and Avoidance patterns are not flaws, but natural responses to past pain. It helps them shift from a place of harsh self-criticism to a place of understanding. Instead of berating themselves for retreating, they can acknowledge the fear that led to that reaction and offer themselves comfort instead of guilt. This shift in perspective is key to creating an environment where change can thrive. When you stop being your own worst critic and start being your own ally, the journey becomes not just easier, but far more empowering. Through self-compassion, avoidance can begin to loosen the grip that perfectionism has on their lives. They don't need to get everything right on the first try. They don't need to be flawless in every interaction. They simply need to show up, be present, and allow themselves the grace to grow at their own pace. With compassion, they can stop seeing their fears as weaknesses and start viewing them as opportunities to grow stronger, more resilient, and more connected. So here we are. You've learned that avoidance isn't a shield from pain. It's a trap that only deepens your suffering. You've learned that pushing people away doesn't protect you. It isolates you. You've realized that change is about forcing yourself to be someone you're not. It's about understanding why you react the way you do and choosing to act despite your fears. And most importantly, you've seen that the path to emotional freedom, to real connection, to living a life you're proud of, starts with one simple choice: to act. It may feel uncomfortable, it may feel terrifying, but that discomfort is a sign that you're on the right path. Growth doesn't happen in your comfort zone. It happens when you lean into the discomfort, take those small steps, and prove to yourself that you are bigger than your fears. Every moment you choose connection over avoidance, every time you show up despite the urge to run, you are building the life you want, a life filled with meaningful relationships, true intimacy, and the emotional freedom you've been craving. The future you desire isn't a distant dream. It's a reality waiting for you to step into it, one brave choice at a time. And remember, this journey is yours to take. Your future self is waiting for you to begin. Take that first step today. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for opening yourself up to the possibility of change. It takes courage to face the truth about yourself, and even more courage to act on it. Know that the journey you're on is not an easy one, but it is worth every bit of effort. You are not alone in this. There is a world out there of people who understand, who support you, and who are rooting for your success. So thank you for taking the time to reflect, to grow, and to make a commitment to yourself. Your future is shaped by the choices you make today, and I'm excited for the incredible transformations you will experience. Keep moving forward, stay brave, and never forget you have everything it takes to create the life and relationships you deserve. Thank you again for your time and your trust. Keep going.